Welcome back to Inside the Philippines. Tonight's story is a little different from the ones you're used to hearing on this channel. And I want to say that up front, so you don't spend the next hour waiting for the part where somebody gets robbed at knife point, or wakes up with an empty bank account and a note on the pillow. That's not this. This one is quieter than that, and I think that's exactly why it's going to stick with you. His name is Joost Vermeulen, 54 years old, from Rotterdam. 31 years working oil rigs in the North Sea, and wherever else the contracts took him. Big hands. Very direct man. The kind who tells you what he thinks before you've finished asking. And here's the thing about Joost that makes his story worth your time. He'd already been burned once, in another country, years before he ever set foot in the Philippines. He knew what that felt like. He came here with a plan. An actual written plan, in a notebook, rules and everything, because he was determined not to be that man twice. I'll let him tell you how that worked out. Here's his story, in his own words. I will say it directly, because that is how I talk, and I am not going to pretend otherwise for a camera. I am not a clever man. I am a careful man. Those are not the same thing, and it took me until I was 54 to understand the difference. Rotterdam. Born there, 1971, in a flat above a garage in Charleroi where the whole building smelled of engine oil, and I think that is probably why I ended up doing what I did. My father worked the docks. His father worked the docks. In our family, you did not have a career. You had a shift. I went offshore at 23. Started as a roustabout, which is a polite word for the man who carries things and gets shouted at, and worked up to derrick hand. 31 years. Mostly the North Sea, out of Den Helder. 2 contracts in Angola. One off Sakhalin, which is a place I would not recommend to anyone, unless you enjoy being cold in a new and educational way. You want to understand me, you have to understand the work. Offshore is not dangerous the way people imagine. It is dangerous the way a bank is robbed, slowly, by somebody not paying attention. Every hour you check the pressure. You write the number in the log. You do the sequence in the order it is written, not the order that seems faster, because the order that seems faster is how men lose hands. I did that for 3 decades. Check. Log. Follow the sequence. Nothing surprises you if you follow the sequence. I believed that about the work, and I believed it about my life. And one of those 2 things was true. 28 days on, 28 off. That is the rotation. And what nobody tells you about the rotation is that it is not really about the 28 on. It is about the 28 off. You come home Tuesday afternoon, and you have 4 weeks, and no reason to get up. My colleagues had wives who were annoyed with them for being away. Children who needed collecting from football. Fine. That is a life. I had a flat in Spijkenisse, and a bicycle, and a very good coffee machine. Nobody was waiting for me either way. I did not go home to something, and I did not leave something behind. I was a name on a crew rotation. That is not self-pity. That is just the accounting. Thailand. All right. I have to do this part, so let me do it quickly. 2016. I met a woman in Pattaya named Nok. She was 34, and I was 45 and very flattered, which is the only explanation anyone needs for anything that happened afterward. 4 years. Nice years, some of them. She laughed at my Dutch, which is fair, and she cooked, and she was there when I woke up. And after 20 years of waking up in a metal box with 3 other men snoring, I want to tell you what that is worth. It is worth more than money. That is the whole problem with it. There was a house, put in her mother's name. Because of course it was. Because a foreigner cannot own land in Thailand either, and everybody explains this to you like it is weather. There was a pickup truck, a Hilux, blue. There was a beauty salon for the sister that opened and closed inside 14 months. There were the brothers' debts, twice, and the second time I remember thinking, well, the first time worked out. And every Dutchman I knew told me. Every one. My sister in Vlaardingen said it on the telephone in exactly 9 words, and I will not repeat them because she was right, and I do not want to give her the satisfaction on the internet. I knew what it looked like from the outside. I decided the outside was wrong. That is the sentence. That is the whole thing in one sentence, and it took me 4 years, and a lot of guilders, euros, sorry, I still think in guilders when I am angry, to arrive at it. It ended on a Wednesday, not over weeks, one afternoon. I came back from Bangkok with a bag of mangoes, and the gate was locked with a new padlock, a bright one, and the number I had called every day for 4 years said the number is not available. That was it. That was the entire ending. I stood outside a house I paid for, holding fruit, for about 20 minutes. Here is the thing people do not believe. I was not destroyed. I was embarrassed. It is a different feeling entirely, and it is worse in some ways, because embarrassment you have to carry into rooms with you. So, August 2020, back to Spijkenisse. 11 months, and half of that with the country shut for the virus, so nothing to do but sit. Everyone assumes I could not stand the gray, the rain, the flat sky, 9 months of the same color, and people say that to me. Ah, you missed the sun. You wanted the beach. No, I lived in the gray for 49 years. The gray and I have an understanding. The problem was different, and I did not have the words for it at the time. I would get up. I would go to the Albert Heijn. I would buy the same things. Bread, cheese, a tray of those little smoked sausages you can eat cold, which is a disgusting habit, and I do not defend it. I would cycle to the water and look at the ships going out to the terminal at Maasvlakte and come back. And nothing I did on any day made any difference to any other human being alive. That is the sentence I want the men watching this to hear, because I think a lot of you are already sitting in your version of that kitchen. It was not the gray. It was that nobody in Holland needed me for anything. I had money, a pension coming, my health apart from the blood pressure, 53 years old. Nothing wrong with me at all. And I sat there in that flat, and I thought, I have been needed for 31 years by a company. That was the wage, not the money. The money was just how they measured it. So when I started thinking about leaving again, I told myself it was about weather. I told myself it was about cost of living, and about how a man can live properly in Asia on what he cannot live properly on here. I made lists. I am good at lists. I was not looking for sun. I want to be honest, because otherwise there is no point telling you any of this. I was looking for somebody to need me. So, where does a man get the idea of the Philippines? Not from the internet. I want to be clear about that, because I know the type of man who watches a video of a beach and buys a ticket, and I was very pleased with myself for not being him. I got the idea from work, from 31 years of work, which I thought made it research. You put a crew on a platform in the North Sea, and about a third of them are Filipino, sometimes more. Deck crew, cooks, catering, mechanics, Cebuanos mostly, some Ilonggos, a few from Mindanao who kept to themselves. And offshore there is nothing to do between shifts except sit in the mess with coffee that has been on the hot plate since the Cold War and talk. So I talked to these men for 20 years. And what did they talk about? Not football, not women, not really. They talked about money going home, Every one of them. Tuition for a niece. A mother's dialysis. I heard the word dialysis from Filipino men on rigs long before I ever heard it in a hospital corridor. A roof. A cousin's operation. There was a bosun named Edgardo, who I worked with off and on for maybe 9 years. Big, quiet man. And one rotation, he showed me a photograph of a house being built, and he was so proud of that house. And he never lived in it. He was building it for his parents. He told me the amount he sent home every month, and it was almost everything. Almost everything. I thought that was magnificent. I still think it is magnificent, and I want to say that now, before I tell you the rest, because nothing that happened to me changed my mind about that. But here is what I did with that admiration, which was stupid. I turned it into a theory. The theory went like this. Thailand did not work because Thailand is a place where a certain kind of business exists, and that business had shaped Nok before I ever met her, and it shaped what I was to her, which was a customer with a longer contract. Fine. My mistake, but a structural mistake. The Philippines, I decided, is different. English-speaking, actually English-speaking, not menu English, Catholic, family-obsessed. No bar street the length of a canal. Filipinos I knew were workers. Filipinos I knew sent money home instead of taking it. You see the flaw. I can hear it now, saying it out loud. I concluded that because Filipinos give money away generously, they would not take mine. That is not logic. That is not even close to logic. But it felt like logic in a flat, in Spikenissa, in the winter, with nothing else to think about. Summer 2021, I sold the flat. Got a decent price, that market was mad then, and I cashed out the offshore supplement on top of the state pension, which does not start until I am 67. So the AOW is a thing waiting for me in the future like a bus you can see coming from a long way off. When it was all done and the taxman had taken his cut, I had 195,000 euros in an ING account. About 11.5 million pesos if you want it in the other currency. And I did the conversion many times that summer, mostly for the pleasure of the number being large. Now, the notebook. I still have it. It is a school exercise book, the squared paper kind. And on the first page I wrote, and I am not going to pretend this is not funny. I know it is funny. I wrote rules, in capitals, underlined twice. 1. No property in anyone else's name. Not the mother, not the sister, not the girlfriend, ever. 2. No monthly allowance for the first 12 months. 3. No loans to family, not any, not one. 4. No marriage before 2 years. 5. And this one was in different ink because I added it later. I think in about January. If you are asked twice for the same thing, the answer is no. I read those out to people. I read them out to my sister in Vlardingen on the telephone, very proudly, like a man reading a safety procedure to a room of new hires, and she went quiet in the way she does, and then said, "Just, that is a good list." And I said, "Yes, it is." And she said, "Who is the list for?" I did not understand the question. I thought she meant which woman. She meant it is easy to write rules about money. She meant the rules did not have my name on them anywhere. Borders opened properly in the spring of 2022. I flew Amsterdam to Doha to Cebu, landed in March, and I will tell you the first thing I remember. Walking out of Mactan Airport at 11 at night, and the air going into my lungs like warm soup. 31 years in the North Sea. Your body does not know what to do with air like that. And the noise. Men shouting grab, sir, grab, and taxi drivers. And the traffic on the way into the city. Jeepneys with their names painted on the front, and the diesel coming through the window. I stayed 6 weeks in a hotel in La Hague, and I was bored out of my mind. Cebu City is fine. I want to be fair to it. But it is a working city, and it was too loud and too fast, and I found I was spending my days in air-conditioned buildings, SM, Ayala Center, walking laps of the same shops, like a man in a hospital corridor. I would eat at the food court. I would buy things I did not need from Watson's because it gave the day a shape. And I thought, I have flown 11,000 kilometers to be in a shopping center. I could be in Rotterdam Central for this. So in May, I went to Dumaguete, because Edgardo the bosun was from Negros, not Dumaguete, somewhere north, Manjuyod. And he had told me years before that if I ever came, I should look at Dumaguete because it was quiet, and there was a university, and the fish was good. That was correct. That was the best advice anyone gave me for free. Dumaguete is small. You can walk it. There is the Rizal Boulevard along the sea, where the old men sit in the afternoon, and the tricycles go past. Hundreds of tricycles, and the noise of them is like a lawnmower that never finishes. Roosters at 4 in the morning. Church bells. Somebody's karaoke 2 streets away, doing My Way at 11 at night. Badly. Forever. I rented a place near the Silliman campus for $14,000 a month, about $225, 2 rooms and a fan. And for the first time in a long time, I got up in the morning with something to do, even if the something was only buying bread. I did the expat thing for a while. There is a cafe near the boulevard where the same men sit at the same table, and I sat with them maybe 6 or 7 times. Australians, 1 Englishman, a German who had been there 19 years. And they were funny for about 40 minutes, and then they were not, because it was all the same conversation. What she took, what the lawyer said, what the immigration people did. Bitter men in short-sleeved shirts telling each other stories with the same shape. And I remember thinking very clearly, I am not going to become one of you. That is in the video, is it not? That is on the recording now. Fine. Leave it in. The other thing about that spring, my blood pressure. There was a doctor in Spijkenisse in 2019 who gave me a piece of paper and told me to take it seriously, and I had been carrying that piece of paper in my wallet for 3 years, folded, going soft at the creases, the way you do. And in Dumaguete, in June, it got hot in a way that made me feel it. The headaches, standing up too fast, and the room going gray at the edges. So on a Tuesday in June 2022, I walked down Purtices Street in the heat to buy the medication I should have been taking since I was 48. There was a pharmacy, not a mercury drug, a smaller one, glass counter, the aircon rattling in the wall, bell over the door. And that is the whole thing. That is the beginning. Not an app, not a website, not a message at 2 in the morning from a girl with a filtered photograph. A man with high blood pressure in a country he had a theory about. Buying pills. The pharmacy was called Sagrado Pharmacy, and it is still there, and I am not going to say which one it is exactly, because she does not need people going to look at her. Glass counter. 2 ceiling fans and 1 aircon unit in the wall that rattled like a bad pump. And on the shelf behind the counter, along with the medicine, a small plastic statue of the Santo Niño with a bit of tinsel on it that stayed there all year, not just at Christmas. That is the Philippines in one shelf, if you want it. I put my piece of paper on the counter. Amlodipine, it said, 5 milligrams. And I have been saying that word for 4 years now, and I still say it wrong. And the woman behind the counter said it back to me, correctly. Not rudely. Just the way you correct a man who is going to have to ask for this again. Rosalie. Everyone called her Sally. 41 years old, which I did not know for some weeks because I did not ask. And when I did find out, I was pleased in a way I am not proud of, because a man my age in this country gets used to being offered 23. She was not beautiful. I want to say that, because in these stories everybody is beautiful. She had a wide face, and her hair pulled back, and reading glasses she kept pushing up onto her head and losing. And she was solid, the way a woman is solid who has been standing 11 hours a day since she was 19. But when she smiled at something, not at me, at something, at a joke a customer made, the whole thing rearranged, and you wanted to see it again. I went back for the blood pressure check. They do that there, P50, about 80 cents. They sit you on a stool by the door and put the cuff on. She took it herself. She looked at the number, and she looked at me, and she said, "Sir, you are not taking this seriously." And she wrote it down in a notebook of her own, and I thought, somebody else who writes things down. 6 weeks. 6 weeks of me buying medication. I could have bought a month's worth of at a time, and instead buying a week at a time, which is an expensive way to flirt. But there it is. I learned in pieces, the way you do when you are standing at a counter and other customers keep coming in. Eldest of 6. Her father a carpenter in the hills above Valencia, up the road toward the volcano, still working at 68, because what else? Her mother, Delia. A son, Jomar, 14 at the time, tall, quiet, good at maths, and useless at everything else, like every 14-year-old boy who has ever lived. And a husband. Yes, a man who went to Saudi in 2009 on a 2-year contract and stopped sending money in the 2nd year and stopped answering in the 3rd, and is, as far as anyone knows, alive, in Riyadh or Jeddah or somewhere, with a different life. She said it without drama. She said, "I am married, but I am not married." I said, "So you are divorced." And she gave me a look I did not understand for about 18 months. A patient look, like I had asked whether it snows here. There is no divorce in the Philippines. None. It is the only country in the world besides the Vatican, which is not even a country, it is a car park with a church. There is annulment, which is not the same thing, and which costs money I will tell you about later. But at the time, it did not register as a problem. It registered as a reason to trust her. Because listen, a woman who has been abandoned by a man who went abroad is not a woman running a business. That was my thinking. She has been on the other end of this. She knows. I asked her to eat with me in August. She said no. Not offended. She said no because her shift ended at 7, and she had to get Jomar's food, and her mother was not well, and Saturday she had church, and Sunday she went up to Valencia. It took 11 days of no before it was yes, and it was lunch, not dinner, at a place near the market that does grilled fish and rice, and the plastic chairs stick to the back of your legs. Now, this is the part one need you to hear properly, because everything else in this story comes from it. She would not take money. I offered to load her phone. It is nothing, P300, €5. Everybody does it. She said no. I said, "Don't be silly." She said, "Just no." And she said it the way you would say it to a dog getting on the furniture. The aircon at the pharmacy, the rattling one. I know pumps. I know compressors. I offered to pay a man to come and fix it because the noise was giving me a headache, and she stood there in that heat all day. She got embarrassed. Not grateful. Embarrassed. Because it was the owner's aircon, and it was not her place to accept that, and I did not understand the shape of that at all. September. Jomar needed shoes for school. Black shoes, the leather kind they must wear. I offered $5,000, €80, nothing. and she said no. And 2 weeks later, I offered again, because I had seen the shoes he was wearing. And she said no again. And this time, she was angry. She said, "And I am giving you this as close to word for word as I can. I have had 4 years to get it right." She said, "I don't want to be a woman who is helped. 4 months. 4 months of no. And here is what I did with that. And I want you to watch me do it. Because this is the whole failure, and it is not glamorous, and there is no villain in it. I had a notebook. 5 rules. Every rule in that book was written against something being taken from me. Asked twice, the answer is no. No allowance in the first year. No loans. I had built a procedure the way you build a procedure offshore, from the incident report of the last accident. And the last accident was Pattaya. And in Pattaya, money was requested. Sally did not request. Sally refused. Repeatedly, and in front of witnesses, and she got cross about it. So the procedure did not apply. That was my reasoning. Not consciously. I did not sit down and think it. But that is what happened in me. The alarm was set to detect one thing, and this was not that thing. Therefore, the panel stayed green. Therefore, proceed. 31 years, and I never once thought about what my instruments were not measuring. October 2022, I moved in with her. Rented place off the road behind the public market, concrete, tin roof, and when it rained, you could not hold a conversation. Rooster at 4. Karaoke from the neighbors, always the same 3 songs. Jamar sleeping in the other room with a fan pointed at his head. And I insisted on the money. Insisted. She refused for 4 days, and I will be honest, I got quite Dutch about it. I said, "I am eating your food, I am using your water. This is not charity, this is arithmetic." That was the word that worked. Arithmetic. She could accept a household contribution when she could not accept a gift. P $18,000 a month. About $300. I wrote it in the notebook on a fresh page, under the rules, with the date. 12 months I wrote next to it, meaning this is the arrangement, and it does not grow. And the last thing, before we go on, because I will not get another good place to put it. I was happy. I got up at 5 because the roosters made the choice for me. I walked to the bakery on the corner for pain de sal, warm, in a paper bag, and brought it back, and there were 3 of us at a table. 3 plates. Somebody asking me to reach something down from a shelf. I had not been that happy since 1998, and I am not going to pretend otherwise now, just because of what it cost. Christmas 2022 was the first time I went up to the family. And I want to describe the road, because the road matters. You go out of Dumaguete toward Valencia, and it climbs. Concrete, then patched concrete, then a track. Bananas either side, and then coconut. And the air gets thinner and cooler, which nobody tells you about the Philippines. That 30 minutes uphill, and you need a jacket in the evening. Basketball court in the barangay with a bent ring. Kids playing on it in the dark. Sari-sari store with the sachets hanging in the doorway like bunting. Shampoo in single-use packets, because nobody up there can buy a whole bottle at once. And the house. Bahay Kubo at the back for storage, and the main house concrete at the bottom. Wood above. Tin roof. And the whole thing built in stages over 30 years as money appeared. Which is how everything gets built here. You do not build a house, you accumulate one. Sally had told me to bring something. She said it lightly. Bring something for the children. So I brought 2 bags from the Robinsons in town. Chocolates, some biscuits, a box of those mango things, and a bottle of Tandwe for her father, because a man told me at the cafe that this is correct. And it was correct. That part 1 got right. I was wrong about the amount. I understood it in about 4 seconds, standing in the doorway. There were, I want to say, 19 people in a house that size. Her parents, her 5 brothers and sisters, 2 of the sisters' husbands, and children. And I still do not know how many of those children belonged to the immediate family and how many were cousins, and I stopped trying because the question does not really exist there. There are just children, and they are all yours. 2 bags for 19 people. Pasalubong, they call it, and it is not a nice gesture, it is a category of obligation, and the arithmetic of it had never once occurred to me. Nobody said anything. That is the thing. Everyone was delighted. Her mother. Delia held my hands in both of hers and said, "Thank you, sir." And one of the small girls was given a single biscuit from the packet, and she was pleased with it. And I stood there working out that I had brought roughly 2,000 of goods, 30 euros, to a Christmas gathering of 19 people, and that I had done it while sitting on 11 million pesos. They put me at the head of the table, which was not a table. It was 2 tables, one of them a door on breeze blocks. And children I had never seen before in my life were calling me Tito Juiced, Uncle Juiced. Within an hour. Not shy about it, not coached. One of them just climbed onto the bench next to me and started telling me about a dog. I am 54. I have never had children. Nobody has ever called me anything except Juiced, or Vermeulen, or offshore, a word I am not going to say on a channel. I will be honest with you, I would have paid money for that hour. And in a sense that is exactly what happened. But I want to be clear that the hour was real, and it was worth it. Now, the arithmetic, since I am the man who likes arithmetic. The father, 68, carpenter, works when work exists. Maybe 600 a day when it exists, and it exists perhaps 12 days a month. Sally at the pharmacy, P11,000 a month, about 175. One sister with a small job in town. One brother, Ronel, 34, always between things. That is roughly 1.5 incomes. 9 people depend on it directly, more if you count properly. And nobody counts properly. You put a foreigner into that equation, and the equation does not stay the same. It cannot. It is not a moral question. It is a physical one. It is like putting a new pump on an old line. The line does not care about your intentions. The line was balanced for the old pressure. I did not see that. I want to say I did, and I did not. What I saw was, this is a family that works, and they are short, and I have more than I need. The word they use is utang na loob. Everybody who makes a video about this country will tell you it means debt of gratitude, and that is the translation, and it is useless. I thought it meant that if you help someone, they feel grateful, and they want to help you back, which sounded fine to me. Very Dutch, actually. You do a favor, the favor is remembered. It does not mean that. It is not a feeling, it is infrastructure. It is the load-bearing structure of the entire family. It goes in every direction at once, and once you are inside it, you are not a benefactor. You are a beam. Beams do not get thanked. Beams hold. Jomar's tuition came first, in the spring. Silliman University, which is a good school, the American Protestant one, right in the middle of town with the big trees. He got in. Maths, he was going to do engineering. P62,000 a year, about $1,000, which for the family was impossible, and for me was a fortnight of the flat's interest. And nobody asked me. I want that on the record, because it matters. Sally would not have asked. Sally was going to have him take a year off and work, and she had already decided this, and told nobody, in the way she did. I offered. I did it in front of her mother, deliberately, because I had worked out by then that Sally could not refuse me in front of her mother, and I am not proud of that maneuver, but it is what I did. So there is the truth. Rule 2 was not broken by a woman crying on a telephone. It was broken by me, on purpose, using her mother as leverage, because I wanted to be the man who paid for a boy's engineering degree. After that, the messages started. Not from Sally, from the siblings. Small ones, 1,500 for a child's medicine, 3,000 because a tricycle needed a part, P800 for something one do not even remember. Gcash. Everyone has Gcash, and it takes 11 seconds, and there is no ceremony to it at all, which is the danger. A bank transfer in Holland feels like a decision. A Gcash transfer feels like answering a text message. Sally found out in about the 3rd month, and she went up the hill and had a fight with Ronel about it, screaming. I heard some of it from the yard in Cebuano, and I did not need the words. She came back down in the tricycle beside me with her jaw set, and she said, "They should be ashamed." And she said, "Do not give them anything. Tell me, and I will handle it." And I thought, there it is. There is my proof. She is not the pipeline. She is the valve. Which was true. That is the terrible part. That was true, and it was still not the whole thing. And I would not learn what the whole thing was for another 2 years. March 2023. Her mother's kidneys. Delia had been tired for a year, and the family said, tired. It was not tired. Silliman Medical, then referred, and the word was the word I first heard on a rig from a bosun with a photograph of a house. Dialysis. Twice a week. End stage. It does not improve. It does not resolve. It just continues until it does not. PhilHealth covers some sessions, not all, and not the medicines, and not the transport down the hill twice a week, and not the blood work. The first year cost $230,000, about $3,800, and there is a corridor at that hospital, green walls, and everyone sitting on the floor because there are not enough chairs, families waiting with plastic bags of food, and Sally stood in it with the papers in her hand and did the thing she always did, which was compute out loud in a flat voice how it might be managed. Sell the pig. Ronel could try Cebu. Maybe reduce to once a week and see. Reduce to once a week and see. That is what she said. About her mother. I said, I will pay for it. She said it was not mine to carry. I said, and I remember this exactly, because it is the most honest thing I said in 3 years, and I did not know it at the time. I said, I have nobody. I have money and no one to spend it on. Let me. By the end of 2023, the ledger looked like this: $18,000 a month household, $62,000 a year for the boy, roughly $19,000 a month for the dialysis and the pills, permanently, forever, until Delia dies. Permanently, forever. I wrote both of those words in the notebook, under the rules, and I did not draw a line through anything. Warning signs? Yes. Fine. Let me list them for you honestly, and let me tell you what I told myself. Ronel was never working. I told myself the economy up there is nothing, which is true. Requests arrived wrapped in prayer. Somebody would message me a photograph of a candle and God bless po, and then the amount. And I told myself, this is not manipulation. These people actually pray. They pray about everything. I have watched them do it when there is no foreigner in the room. Also true. And when they talked about me at the table, which they did, in front of me, they used the word blessing. Si Tito Just, our blessing. God sent him. I liked it. There is no version of this where I tell you I did not like it. But hear what it actually is, because it took me 2 more years to hear it. If a man is a blessing, he is not a person who made a choice. He is a thing that arrived, and a thing that arrived can be prayed for and depended on, and, if it stops, mourned, but not exactly argued with. I thought I was being folded into a family. I was. That is the thing nobody wants to say plainly. I was being folded into a family, genuinely, and being farmed by it, genuinely. And those are not two different situations. That is one situation with 9 people in it and 1.5 incomes. The house was my idea. I need to say that first, and I need to say it flatly, because there is a version of this story where a woman leads a foreigner up a hill and points at a piece of land and cries. And that is not what happened. Nobody pointed. Nobody cried. I did the arithmetic on a Tuesday afternoon on the boulevard with a bottle of water sweating in my hand, and then I went home and announced it like a decision from head office. Here is how the arithmetic went, and I want you to hear how reasonable it sounds, because that is the whole trap. I was paying $14,000 a month rent, then pay $18,000 into the household, and rent is money that dies. 31 years offshore taught me to hate waste more than I hate almost anything. A foreigner cannot own land in this country. Cannot. Full stop. There is no clever route. The Constitution says no, and it has said no since 1935. You can own a condominium unit, and there are 2 buildings in Dumaguete I would consider, and neither of them was what I wanted. And anyway, a condominium is a box in the sky, and I had lived in a box in the sky at sea for 3 decades. But her father had land, about 400 square meters up in the barangay, next to the parents' house, inherited, tax declaration only, not even a proper title, which I did not fully understand at the time, and which is normal up there. Half that hillside is held on paper that would make a Dutch notary weep. And I thought, it is already family land. It is not going anywhere. Nobody sells that. It stays in the family for 100 years. So the question is not whether I own it. The question is whether I get to live in a house instead of paying rent to a man in town who does nothing. Rule number 1. No property in anyone else's name. Not the mother, not the sister, not the girlfriend. Ever. Capitals, underlined twice. First page. I got the notebook out. I remember doing it. I sat at the plastic table with the fan going, and I found the page, and I put a line through Rule 1 myself, with my own pen, and I wrote next to it, not applicable. Family land. No alternative. Not applicable. 3 decades of writing in logs, and that is the entry I made. And nobody asked me to. Sally said no for about a week, actually. She said, "Just, if we build there, you cannot take it with you." And I said, "I know." And she said, "You cannot take it." And I said, "Yes, I heard you. I am not stupid. Look at that exchange. Look at it properly." She warned me, twice, in plain English, which is what they speak, and I answered like a man who thought she was being modest about her father's land. Quoted at P1.4 million, about $23,000. 2 bedrooms, concrete hollow block to the ceiling, tin roof, GI sheet they call it, a proper CR with a flush toilet, instead of the pail and dipper arrangement, and a concrete water tank on a stand, because up there the supply comes on for 4 hours in the morning, and that is your day. And the foreman was a cousin. Of course he was. Not a scam, that is genuinely how it works. You do not put a tender out in a barangay. You use who you have. He was competent, actually. That is the funny part. The block work on that house is good. But cement went up. Then there was a typhoon in November that put the whole hillside off work for 11 days and washed out part of the access track, and the track had to be rebuilt before the delivery truck could come up. And that was P40,000 nobody had costed. Then rebar, then the electrical, and then Delia's dialysis chair being what it was. I paid for a ramp, which was not in the plan, and which I would do again. Final cost, by the time the roof was on in August 2024, $1.9 million, about $31,000. Now, the tricycle. This is the small thing. This is the one that actually mattered. In July 2024, I sent $140,000, $2,300 for roofing materials, GI sheets, purlins, the fasteners. Sent it to Ronell because Ronell was up there and Sally was on shift, and it was faster. 3 weeks later, I went up on the Sunday, and the roof was half done, and there was a tricycle in the yard. Second-hand, blue and yellow, with a name painted along the body in the way they do, and the name painted on it was his. He drives it for a living now, by the way. He actually works. That is the thing. It was not a toy. And I stood in that yard in the heat, with the smell of hot tin and diesel, and I did what any Dutchman does. I opened my mouth to say the direct thing. That is my one skill. I have been the man in the meeting who says the number out loud since I was 26. And I looked around the yard, and every single person there already knew about the tricycle. And every single person there was saying nothing about the tricycle. And I understood, not with my head, with my body, the way you understand a pressure change, that if I said it, the thing that would break would not be Ronell. It would be the afternoon. It would be Delia's face. It would be 4 years of Sunday lunches. So I said nothing. I ate the Lechon. Somebody put karaoke on. A child sat on my foot. That was the first time in my life the direct approach had nowhere to go. 31 years I was the man who says it. And up that hill there was no socket to plug it into. They call it saving face, and that makes it sound like vanity. It is not vanity. It is the load-bearing wall of the whole family, and I was the only person in the yard who did not know how to live inside it. I told myself, it is $2,300, the roof got finished anyway, the man needs an income, and now he has one. Every word of that is true, and I never once said it out loud to him or to her, and the not saying sat in me for 2 years like water in a bilge. Then, the lawyer, August 2024, and this is the part where one had to learn what she meant 2 years earlier, with that patient look about whether it snows here. I wanted to marry her. Rule 4, no marriage before 2 years. We were past 2 years, so I was, in my own accounting, compliant. And there is a practical side. A 13A marriage visa means you stop doing the tourist extension dance every couple of months, standing in the Bureau of Immigration office in Dumaguete with your photocopies. Except she is married, legally, permanently, to a man in Saudi Arabia who has not been heard from since 2012. The Philippines has no divorce, none. It is the only country in the world other than the Vatican, and the Vatican is a car park with a church in it. What exists is annulment, which is not a divorce with a different name. It is a court declaring that the marriage was never valid in the first place, and you have to prove that with a psychologist and witnesses and a prosecutor whose actual job is to argue against you in case you are colluding. We took the ferry to Cebu, met a lawyer in an office on Osmeña Boulevard, 3rd floor, aircon, a wall of certificates, and a coffee that arrived on a tray. 2 to 4 years, possibly 5. Total, all in, around $480,000, about $8,000. No guarantee. He said that part twice, to his credit. No guarantee. And there is also the fact that if you get it wrong and marry anyway, bigamy is a criminal offense here, and it is her who goes to jail, not me. Retainer and the psychological evaluation and the initial filing, $180,000, $2,900. I paid it in the office. There was a man with a stamp, and on the way back to the pier, I did the thing I had not done properly in 2 years. I sat on a bench at the terminal with the ferry not yet in, and I opened the banking app. Household, 26 months, Tuition, 2 years. Dialysis and medicines, going on 2 years. The house, P1.9 millioners. The G-Cash ones, which I had never added up because each one was the price of a coffee in Amsterdam. 121,000 euros. Give or take. I had come with 195. I sat there and I checked it. Then I checked it again, the way you check a gauge you do not like, and it did not move, because gauges do not move for you. And the strangest thing, I want to be honest about this, I was not frightened of the number. I was frightened of a different thing entirely, which took me another 6 months to be able to say, I had spent 121,000 euros, and I could not point to one single thing in the world that was mine. Not the house, not the land, not the woman, legally, not even the ramp. After that, the small cracks came faster, and they were all the same crack. $35,000 I sent for the water tank became a fiesta, a proper one, the barangay fiesta, the whole street eating, a pig, a rented sound system. And when I asked, carefully the way you ask when you have learned there is nowhere to put a direct question, Delia said the neighbors had helped when she was sick, and that was completely true, and utang na loob is not a metaphor. They had carried her down that track in a chair. There was a request that arrived as a novena. 9 days of prayers for a specific intention, and the intention was a cousin's operation, and on the 9th day, the amount. And I could not tell you now whether that was calculation or faith. And here is what 4 years taught me. It was both, and the person sending it could not have told you either. And Sally was in the middle of all of it, thinner than when I met her, working her shift, arranging the dialysis transport, defending her family to me, and defending me to her family, and being tired in a way that I mistook for the ordinary tiredness of a woman with a job. She said one thing that autumn that I did not hear properly at the time. We were sitting outside and the karaoke was going somewhere, and she said, when this is finished, when the annulment is finished, will you still want this? I said, of course. Obviously. What a question. She was not asking about the annulment. The 6 months after that ferry ride were not dramatic. That is what nobody tells you. There was no scene. There was just a slow change in me that I could not have named at the time, and which everybody around me could feel immediately. I started asking questions first. That is all. Before, a message would come, and I would send. Now, a message would come. P4,000 for a child's antibiotics. P12,000 because a carabao had to be treated, which is a real expense. Do not laugh. That animal is a tractor. And I would write back and ask which pharmacy, or which vet, or how much exactly, or can it wait until Sunday? Perfectly reasonable questions. In Rotterdam, these are just questions. Up that hill, they are not questions. Up that hill, they are an accusation with a question mark on the end. And I did not know that, and by the time I worked it out, I had already asked about 30 of them, and I had become something in that family that I had not been before, which was cold. Nobody used the word. Nobody ever uses the word. But the messages got shorter, and the Sunday lunches got quieter, and Delia started saying sir again, which she had not done since 2022. Sally was in the middle of it, and she was being crushed. I could see it happening, and I told myself it was the shift work. She was 43 by then. She was doing 11 hours behind that counter, then the dialysis logistics twice a week. Hire the tricycle, get her mother down the track, 4 hours at the center. Get her back up before dark. Then Jomar's exam schedule. Then whatever her brothers had done that week. And then me, sitting at the plastic table with my banking app and my questions. We had 2 arguments about Ronel. Actual arguments, raised voices. which we almost never did. And both times she ended up defending him, and then apologizing for defending him. And then she said the thing that I should have understood as the whole problem. She said, "He is my brother. What am I supposed to do?" And I said, "Nothing. That is my point. You are supposed to do nothing." And she looked at me like I had suggested she stop breathing to save on air. There is no version of nothing. That is what I did not understand. In Holland, if my sister's husband is useless, my sister's husband is useless, and it is my sister's problem, and we all get on with it, and I love her the same. Up that hill, there is no boundary you can draw that does not amount to abandonment. Not to them. To them, it is the same act. Then the house. Finished, January 2025. Properly finished. Painted. The water tank up on its stand. The CR working. The ramp for Delia's chair. It is a good house. I told you the blockwork is good. From the road you can see it, and it looks like something a man built for himself. And in it, from the day the paint dried, her mother and father, one sister, and two nieces. Which was correct. Which was the only possible outcome. The old house was rotten at the base, and Delia cannot get down a step to a pail and dipper CR twice a day. And the whole reason I put a ramp in was that I knew that. I have never slept a night in it. Not one. I have eaten there maybe 40 times. There is a room that is supposedly ours, with a bed in it, and Sally and I stayed in town because of her shift and Jomar's school, and every time I went up there was somebody's washing on the line, and a cousin sleeping on the floor, and the television on loud, and it was a family home, a good one, working exactly as intended. P 1.9 million. 31,000 euros. 9 months of my life spent driving up that track to check the rebar. And I want to be careful here, because this is where a bitter man lies. I did not build that house for myself. I knew where it was going. I told you, I crossed out my own rule with my own pen. What I did not know was how it would feel to stand in a doorway you paid for and wait to be invited past it. February 2025. And the thing that finally opened it up had nothing to do with me at all. It was the tricycle again. Ronel had borrowed money against it, from a woman in the barangay who lends at 5% a month, which is what people use up there because a bank will not look at them. And he had not paid, and she had come to the house, and there was shouting on the porch. I was in the yard. Sunday afternoon, hot, that smell of tin roof and burnt rice and somebody's pig. The whole thing in Cebuano, very fast, and I understood maybe 1 word in 20, but you do not need the words. Delia crying. The father saying nothing at all, which is what he always did. 2 of the sisters going at each other. And at some point Ronel said something and pointed at me. Pointed. And the shouting changed direction and got quieter, which is worse. May came down the steps to where I was standing. May is the youngest, 29, sharp, the only one who ever asked me a question about Holland that was not about money. And she was furious. Not with me, with all of them, with the whole afternoon. And she said, in English, very deliberately, so that everyone on that porch could hear that she was saying it in English. "Do you know they talked about you before Sally even met you?" I said, "What?" And she told me, standing in the yard with my shirt stuck to my back. Not a plot. That is the first thing I need you to understand, and the last thing anyone wants to hear, because a plot would be so much easier. It was a prayer. For maybe 6 years, since the husband stopped answering, this family had prayed, out loud, at the table, at Mass at the cathedral when they came down to town, by name, in the way they pray about everything, that God would send Sally a good man. And in that barangay, in that arithmetic, a good man who can help means a foreigner. There is no other category. They had said it. Everybody had said it. When Sally first mentioned the Dutchman who kept coming in for his blood pressure pills, her mother said, "God is answering." May said, they were happy for her. And they were happy for themselves. Both. And then she said the thing that I have carried for 18 months. She said, "My sister loves you, Just, but you were also the answer to the prayer. Do you understand? You were both." I said I understood. I did not standing there. It took months. But I want to be fair to May, because she was not being cruel, and she was not exposing a conspiracy. She was being honest in a family where nobody is ever honest out loud. And she did it in English on purpose, because she had decided somebody should tell me before I spent the rest of my life up that hill without knowing what I was inside of. Here is the arithmetic that took me the longest. Sally refused my money for 4 months. That was real. Sally fought her own brother over P3000. That was real. Sally told me I could not take the house with me, twice, in plain English. And I overrode her. Real. She loved me. She loves me. I am not going to put it in the past tense because I do not believe it is in the past tense. And that is real. And it is also real that she was the eldest daughter of 9 people, and 1.5 incomes, and a mother on a machine, and that a woman in that position who meets a kind foreigner with money is not making a choice between love and survival. She does not experience them as 2 separate things. Nobody in that house did. Nobody was lying. There was nothing to lie about, which means there is no villain, which means there was never a red flag for me to catch. And my notebook, 5 rules, capitals, underlined twice, was a smoke detector installed in a house that was slowly filling with water. I did not confront her. I want to say why, because men write to me about this. It is not nobility. It is that there was nothing to confront. What was I going to say? You should not have needed your mother to have kidneys? I hoped you would want me for the reason I invented? And there was one exchange. Only one. 3 days later, in town, at the table with the fan going, and she said, "Are you leaving?" And I said, "I need to check the numbers." And she went very still, because she had lived with me for 2.5 years, and she knew exactly what that sentence was. It was not a delay. It was the answer. When a man like me says he will check the numbers have already been checked. She did not cry. She did not beg. She did not get angry, which honestly I would have preferred. She just nodded once and got up and put the rice on. And that was the most terrible thing that has ever happened to me. Then I shut it down the way you shut down a well, because that is the only thing I know how to do. 2 weeks, sequenced, written down. I called the lawyer in Cebu and stopped the annulment. The P180,000 is gone. You do not get a retainer back, and there was no result to get. And the man was decent about it and said the file stays open for 2 years if I change my mind. The house. I had the tax declaration and the improvements documented in her father's name properly, with the barangay captain as a witness, so that nobody in that family can ever fight about it after he dies. That took 4 days and cost me 6,000 ardent thalers in fees. It is the single most useful thing I did in 3 years, and it benefits me not at all. I paid 2 months ahead on the town rental, so Sally and Jomar were not moved suddenly. I gave Jomar the rest of that academic year, P31,000, in one transfer, direct to the university, because I did not want it going through anyone. And I said goodbye at the pharmacy counter, not the house. The pharmacy, glass counter, rattling aircon, the little Santo Niño with the tinsel on it, still there. Tuesday morning, she was on shift. She said, Your medication. I said, I have it. She said, take it properly this time. And that was it. 54 years old, in a pharmacy on Purtice Street, being told off about my blood pressure by the woman I had just spent everything on. And I walked out into that heat and got on a tricycle, and I did not look back at the window, and I regret that. That is the one thing on the whole list I would change. So, where I am now, and then I will stop talking. I live in Sibulan. It is the next town north of Dumaguete, 5 minutes from the airport, and if you get the right place you can see the water, and Cebu on the other side of it, on a clear morning. Paid $11,000 a month, about $170. 1 bedroom, a gas ring, a fridge, a plastic table, and a chair I bought from a man on the road who makes them out of old truck springs, and it is the most comfortable chair I have ever owned. The account has 71,000 euros in it. I came with 195. 3 years. Give or take a few hundred. That is the figure. And I have checked it more times than is healthy. The list of what I do not have is short, and I can say it without stopping now, which took a while. No house. There is a house, a good one, concrete to the ceiling, tin roof, water tank on a stand, up in the hills above Valencia, and it belongs to a 68-year-old carpenter, and it always did, and I put my own name nowhere near it, because that is the law, and I knew the law. No annulment. That file is closed, and the P180,000 is somewhere in an office on Osmeña Boulevard in Cebu. No wife, and there was never legally a way to have one, and I paid 8,000 euros worth of retainer to be told that slowly by a polite man with a coffee tray. And no 13 visa, obviously, so I am still doing the tourist extensions. Every couple of months, down to the Bureau of Immigration office, photocopies, the fee, the stamp. 3 years of it. You can keep that going for a long time if you leave and come back. And I go to Singapore for 2 days once a year and eat noodles and feel like an idiot in an airport. The first 11 months after I moved out, I did nothing. I want to be honest about that, because the recovery part of these stories is usually a montage. And it was not a montage. I did not leave the province. I could have gone home, and I thought about it every week, and I did not go, and the reason is stupid and true. I did not want to arrive in Schiphol and have my sister look at my face. I did not go back to the cafe on the boulevard either. The bitter table. Australians, the Englishman, the German of 19 years. I walked past it maybe 50 times, and I never once sat down. And I am prouder of that than of anything else in this whole account, because I could have. I had the qualifications. I had a whole speech ready about what they take, and what the lawyer said, and what the immigration people did, and there was a chair with my name on it, and I knew that if I sat in it once, I would be sitting in it in 2040. I cooked. I walked. I read paperbacks people leave behind. I got my blood pressure down to something the doctor did not sigh at, which, given what caused all of this, has a certain flavor to it, and I did not tell my sister the number. For 1.5 years I gave her the shape of it, and not the number. Then in November last year she asked me directly, the way she does, and I said it out loud in Dutch for the first time. 120.000 euro. Saying a number in your own language is different. In English, it is data. In Dutch, it was my father's flat above the garage in Charleroi, and every 28-day rotation, and the Sakal in winter, all of it, said out loud in the language it was earned in. She did not say, "I told you so." She has never once said it, about Thailand either. She said, "Are you eating?" That is my sister. Now, the thing that is left, and it is the only part of this, one will defend. I still send $8,000 a month for Delia's dialysis. About $130. Nobody asked me. Nobody can make me. There is no legal instrument on this earth that connects me to that woman. I was never married to her daughter. I cannot be. There is no divorce in this country, and there never was going to be one in time. I send it on the 2nd of the month. It goes to the clinic directly now, not to anyone's Gcash, because I learned that much. And men will tell me that is weakness. I have had messages. You are still paying, they say. She is still using you? Wake up. No. Here it is, and I will say it directly, because that is how I talk. I ran a rig for 31 years. My entire working life was consequences. You close this valve, and that pressure goes there, and if you pretend you do not know that, men die, and it is you who killed them. I do not get to be 54 years old and suddenly claim, I do not understand what happens when I stop. If I stop, she gets 1 session a week, instead of 2. And then she gets none. And then she dies sooner. And worse. That is not a feeling. That is arithmetic. And I am the man who likes arithmetic. I chose it. Nobody chose it for me. And at 71,000 euros, and an AOW pension coming when I am 67, $130 a month is affordable. And I ran that calculation properly before I committed to it, which is the one and only time in 3 years I did that, in the correct order. So, that is the only thing in this entire story that is actually mine. Not the house, not the land. A payment. Sally and I speak. Not often. Messenger, maybe once a month. Jomar is in his 3rd year, still engineering, still good at maths, and he sent me a photograph of a bridge he had drawn, and I looked at it for about 20 minutes. She is still at the counter. She turned 45 in April. I hate her sometimes. Late, usually, when the neighbors are doing karaoke, and I am on my own with a plate. And I also think she is the best person I have ever met, and I miss her in a way that is physically inconvenient. And both of those are true in the same evening, and I have stopped trying to resolve them. Now, what I have to say to you, and then I am finished. Nobody in the Philippines had to lie to me. That is the brutal truth, and it is not the one you came here for. You came here for a woman with 3 foreign boyfriends, and a fake sick mother, and a bank account in Cebu. Those exist. Go and watch those videos, they are true too. But mine was better than that, and worse. Nobody deceived me. Her mother's kidneys were real. The tuition was real. The land had no title because that hillside has never had titles. The prayers were real prayers said by people who actually believe in a cathedral, out loud, before I existed to them. Every single peso I sent because I looked at a real problem and decided to solve it. And I was right that it was a real problem, and I would be right again. I handed it over myself. And here is what I will not do. Not for you. Not for this channel. I will not stand here and say I should not have wanted to. I was 53 years old in a flat in Spykenisse, buying the same bread every day and making no difference to any living person. Wanting to matter to somebody is not a character flaw. It is the most reasonable thing about me. The failure was not trust. The failure was the notebook. 5 rules, capitals, underlined twice, and every single one written against a woman taking something from me. I built a detector for the last accident, and what actually happened was that I walked into a family of 9 on 1.5 incomes with a mother on a machine, and I said yes, and yes, and yes, and yes, and every yes was correct, and the sum of the correct answers was 124,000 euros. That is the part nobody warns you about, because it does not sound like a warning. It sounds like being a decent man. So if you are that man, sitting in a kitchen in Leeds or Brisbane or Grand Rapids at 11 o'clock at night with a website open, I am not going to tell you not to come. I am not qualified, and I would be lying. I will give you the rule that should have been in my book. One line. It replaces all 5. Do not ask what she wants. Ask what you are actually buying, and then ask whether you can pay for it every month for 20 years. Because that is the term. That is the real term. A mother's kidneys do not have an end date, and neither does a family. And if the answer is no, then say no, now, at the beginning, while no is still a small word. Because I could have. In October 2022, standing in a pharmacy with a plastic Santo Niño on the shelf and a woman who had refused my money 4 times, I could have said, I have $195,000. That is all there will ever be. Here is what I can do, and here is what I cannot. And it stops here. And it stops here even when it is your mother. She would have understood that. She was the most practical person in that whole province. She might even have been relieved. I never said it. Not once, in 3 years. And that silence cost more than every peso in this story. Take your medication. That is my other piece of advice. Somebody told me that once. That was Joost Vermeulen, 54, from Rotterdam, still in Sibulen, still on tourist extensions, still sending Pite 1,000 on the 2nd of every month. And I want to sit with what he said for a moment, because I think it is the most useful story we have ever put on this channel. And it is also the one that will get the most angry comments. There is no villain in it. Nobody stole from him. No woman ran off with a bank card. He was not catfished. He was not blackmailed. He was not set up. He walked in with his eyes open, a written plan, and 1 previous disaster's worth of experience. And he still lost 124,000 euros, because the thing that took it was not a crime. It was a family of 9 people, an income and a half, a mother who needed a machine twice a week, and a decent man who could not find a place to put the word no. That is the part of this country that the horror stories cannot teach you. Deception you can defend against. Obligation you cannot. Not with a list. Not with rules. Not with having been burned once already. Only with a number you decide in advance and say out loud to the person you love, early, while it is still cheap to say. So if you are watching this because you are thinking about coming, do the sum first. Not the sum of a monthly allowance, the sum of a life. Parents, siblings, tuition, medicines, the fiestas, the emergencies, 20 years of it. And then look at what is actually in your account and tell the truth about whether those 2 figures can live together. If they cannot, say so on day 1. Saying it on day 1 is a kindness. Saying it in year 3 is what Joost had to do, and you have heard what that cost him. And it was not the money. Thank you for spending this time with us. If this one landed, leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. The comments on these stories help more men than the videos do. Subscribe if you haven't, and take care of yourselves out there. This has been Inside the Philippines.